Purposeful Lab show. I am Dr. Dan Keebler, host for the show, and this is a show produced by Franciscan University's faithandreason.com. We've been this season looking at the topic of the nature of man and woman, and this is our sixth and final episode in this season. And I'm delighted to have with me one of Franciscan's theology faculty members, Dr. Deborah Savage. Dr. Savage, thanks for sitting on to talk.
My honor, really. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, so you've been here at Franciscan now for, I think, 3 years.
This is my fourth year.
Starting your fourth year, yeah. So you came here in 2021, and you came from the University of St. Thomas.
Right.
Yeah, and but so you have an interesting background. You haven't always been an academic.
Right.
You had a business career first. So you have this business career, and then switched into theology. So it'd be great just to hear what your sort of like journey was. What first maybe got you interested in business, and what drove you into the business field, and then what made you switch?
Well, there's a lot of steps in that tale, but I guess I'd have to say that what drove me to the study of business was, first of all, my dad.
Okay.
Because he owned his own business, and he was really a courageous man, worked really hard. And then when I got to college, I was surrounded by Marxists.
Okay.
That was in the 70s.
Yeah.
Everyone was, and I knew that they were crazy.
Where were you in college? Where was that?
In San Jose State University
Okay.
in San Jose, California. I was born in California.
Okay.
San Francisco, actually. And so anyway, I decided I would be a lawyer, and I would be a corporate lawyer, and I would defend big companies against the Marxists or something like that. But the other reason I decided to go that route was because my dad and I had always argued about whether or not truth and reality had anything to do with one another. Believe it or not, It was a constant refrain. Yeah. And I would say, well, I think it must. I mean, reality, there must be some relationship.
Some connection between
the two. But he said, oh, you're just a hopeless idealist. When you get older, you'll discover blah, 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 And then my business professor said the same thing. Miss Savage, you're arguing about the wrong. People have been arguing about this stuff for years. Basically the message was, in order to get ahead, you have to lie, cheat, or steal, or some version of that.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that's just plain stupid. I don't believe it. And so that's sort of the beginning of the story of how I got to where I wanted to be. But it was because I was sort of a free market advocate, if you will, and concerned about all of that. I was a philosopher, but I didn't realize it. And so, but also because my dad said I was a hopeless idealist. So I had to prove to him that I wasn't. So I put myself through college working as a factory operator in the semiconductor industry in California. And I was in that industry for a long time. Best job I ever had, actually. It was really good. I loved the work, and I learned a lot. But skipping ahead some years, I eventually made my way up the chain of command, and eventually opened my own consulting firm. And along the way, I became kind of an expert at quality management, what you would call Six Sigma now. I don't know if you've heard about that. It doesn't look like you have.
Yeah, I know.
Well, in manufacturing organizations, it's a big deal. It has to do with basically the bottom line, minimizing variation around a target value. I could say more about that. But the Japanese were, at the time, 70s and 80s, were really good at that, even though they learned those methods from us. And the American companies I was consulting with, earning tons of money, getting nowhere, trying to help them use these methods because they just didn't have the patience. And then as I did my research into it, over time, I found out that the Japanese succeeded at those methods to some extent because of their spiritual traditions.
Interesting.
Especially Confucian virtue ethics. And I that's just really weird. Why? What happened to our tradition? Why is it not informing our work behavior in the same way?
Sure.
Because they live these integrated lives. It's not, we go to church on Sunday maybe and work on Monday, and there's this gap. We're so fragmented. But they live these really integrated lives. It turns out it has to do with the 5 fiduciary relationships that are a part of the Confucian. It's really profound. And there's actually management papers, research studies done, linking Confucian virtue ethics to their success with those methods. So I said, I knew all along, because I'd been a production operator, that the American management was reducing this to these techniques, and the most important people that needed the training were frontline employees. I just knew that there was something more to it than that, and lo and behold, there it was. So I mean, I had a lot of success as a manager. I realized later I was using the principles of Catholic social thought to manage my life, and those were questions that wouldn't leave me in peace. Like, what happened? Was it missing from our tradition? Where did the gap take place, right? And so someone said, I didn't know what to study. I knew I didn't want an MBA. MBAs were generally useless as far as I was concerned. And so someone said, just go get a master's in theology. You don't know if you'd be any good at it anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went and I did that. And when I was done with the master's, the year before, I realized I wasn't done.
Yeah.
Because actually, don't tell anyone, but a master's, you still don't know anything. So I said, I'll get a PhD, then I'll know something. But I still didn't have an answer to my question. So I went on to study philosophy and theology. My doctorate's in both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were trying to sort of integrate the work ethic with sort of
yes,
Catholic principles.
I was interested in the question of sort of faith and work, as we called it at the time, from Sunday to Monday. But I also knew that Bible studies in the workplace were not the answer either. There was something more comprehensive, some kind of system of some kind, some paradigm, something that was needed. And it does seem as though the linchpin, the thing that connects them together, is the virtues, by the way. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So there's so much more to that, though, than we have time for. But so anyway, I finished my degree. I thought I'd teach business ethics. Couldn't get a job anywhere because no one understood my CV. Who is this woman?
That's a very unusual combination.
Yeah, and I wrote my dissertation on the meaning of human work, actually the self-transcending subject.
Okay.
Yeah, on JP2's encyclical on that topic. And so anyway, no one could really understand what I was up to in business departments. And so I was desperate. I needed a job really badly. And I finally landed one teaching philosophy at the seminary, which is a college at the University of St. Thomas. So I spent 13 years teaching philosophy to the men in the pre-theology program. And that was definitely God's plan.
Yeah.
Because he was saying, you're a philosopher, you don't seem to get it. You're going to do this. Even though I never read David Hume, so I had a lot of remedial work to do to catch up. It was really great. But anyway, I figured it out. It was John Locke and the Letters of Toleration that said, don't talk about religion in public. Keep it a private affair. And so anyway, I finally figured out what happened. It was a historical mishap.
Diverge and put this bifurcation between your faith life and your work life.
It's definitely not. The move is towards integration.
Yeah.
Especially if you're Catholic.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what brought you into the field of looking at sort of the men and women, the dignity of men and women from work to that? What was that transition like? What brought that about?
That's a little harder to pinpoint. I was working in this research area, kind of like not moral capitalism, but the morality of the market, and all those sorts of questions. That was my first love. And then my spiritual director said, it seems to me you really ought to be working in this area, because I was already a JP2 groupie. And so he said, why are you spending all this time on the moral marketplace? Sorry, but that just seems so far removed from something important, which of course he's not really right about that. But he said you should really think about this, and I knew that he was right, because I was already thinking at that time about the deeper meaning of Genesis 1-3. Those passages, those chapters of Genesis have fascinated me.
Yeah, it's interesting how JP2 wrote a lot about the nature of work, the dignity of work, and then the dignity of man and woman, and the nature of man and woman. And so it seems like if you get into JP2, you're gonna get into both of those.
No, that's right. And in fact, there's a connection, because he says in this encyclical that work is a fundamental dimension of human existence.
Yeah.
And the only other place where he uses that precise language is when he's talking about the notion of self-gift. The I-thou relationship
Yeah.
is a fundamental dimension of human existence, he says,
Okay.
and crossing the threshold of hope. And I tried to figure out what's the relationship. Well, all human activity has to be ordered toward authentic human flourishing. Our work is ordered toward the person.
Yeah.
And they're both dimensions, fundamental dimensions of human existence. Maybe
Yeah.
the only two are the most fundamental. So there is a connection. But anyway, so then I started to take that up. And I got asked to speak about the feminine genius, because that was circling, JP, that went around like wildfire. And then, just anticipating where we're going with this, I started to notice that speaking about the feminine genius, especially to groups of church women
Right.
over dinner with a
Yeah.
glass of wine, it turned into this strange kind of Catholic feminism in a way,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden we're laughing about how stupid our husbands are because they don't have genius or something like that. I don't know. And I knew there was something wrong with that. So I stopped. I said, I don't speak about the feminine genius anymore. I speak about complementarity, and I started to work on a theory of the masculine genius, and I have one. And I think I'm probably the first to have pinpointed it and given it the same sort of starting place, origin in Scripture,
Yeah.
and made it a part of my theory of man and woman. So and my own argument would be you cannot study woman apart from man, or man apart from
Yeah.
woman. They come together.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because you talk in your writings about how men and women have equal dignity, but
Yeah.
they're not interchangeable. Right.
Right.
There's and we live in a society that now thinks men and women are basically interchangeable and switch some body
Right.
parts around and you can
Yes.
swap roles and so forth. So what is it that that is what's maybe at the heart of that
Yeah.
they're not interchangeable?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, and well, that's a longer answer,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
let me start here that, first of all, men and women are 98% or so the same DNA. Okay. So we're both equally human.
Yeah.
And if you look at, scientifically, but if you look at Genesis 1 in particular, I can speak about that in a minute. Genesis 1, actually the sacred author is communicating to us that man and woman are equally human. And it has to do with the meaning of the word Adam in the Hebrew, which we can come back to.
Yeah.
So the challenge of distinguishing man and woman without falling into the trap of stereotypical
Right. That's
roles, and
always the
so
concern, yeah.
that's a real quest. Yeah. And I think I've hit on it, or at least I'm tracing it. I'm still working in Genesis 1 and 2, in this case in particular, Genesis 2. And I keep adding to that theory, but we can go.
Yeah, let's get into that. So let's we just talk about what Genesis 2 has to say about the masculine genius, and then work our way to the feminine genius. So, what is it that you see in the text of Genesis 2?
Well, you have to do 1 and 2.
Okay,
actually,
1 and 2, yeah.
But I can do them quickly. So I want to clarify. Start with the masculine. Just start with man, because he is first in the order of creation. Now, that'll always make people nervous. Doesn't that mean women are secondary and blah, blah? Actually, it doesn't. So just hear me out.
Yeah.
Okay. So Genesis 1, the word Adam actually refers to man in the collective sense. Meaning it would be if you've taken philosophy, man per se, man in the abstract. The reason we use the masculines, to describe humanity is because it's a generic term meaning all of us. Well, Adam stands for man in the collective sense. They wouldn't have had a notion of what the philosophers, Thomas will call a substantial form, an individual's soul that, instantiated in individual bodies.
Yeah.
The Semitic language and the whole Jewish tradition actually is very, very communal. So but within man is embodied all of humanity. So they're always thinking concretely. They don't think in abstractions. So you have to, in order to understand, it's sort of in our terms, Thomistic terms anyway, what's going on in Genesis 1 and 2, you have to look first at Hebraic anthropology. And Hebraic anthropology is very different in that the soul is something that encompasses all of the community in a way. So there's this notion of a corporate personality. And the idea is that the one contains the many.
Many, yeah.
And the many represents the one.
One, yeah.
And so there's this oscillation constantly going. It's metaphysical reality. That's why the Jewish people are so very communal. And in fact, our understanding of family is very much grounded in the Jewish understanding of family.
Yeah. So and Adam as being sort of the head and representing the whole community in a sense.
Yes, but not Adam, the husband of Eve, or something.
Right, yeah.
Adam, humanity.
Right.
So then as you go through the text, that word changes from Adam to Ha-Adam, which means that man, and then it kind of goes to more lower or more granular levels of specificity until you get to the point at Genesis 2:24 when woman is created, and it's only at that moment in the text that the Semitic author, the sacred author, refers to them as Ish and Isha. And Ish means man, the man of the male of the species. I mean, man. This is Adam. This is the Adam. So up until that point, when he's naming all the animals in the garden, it's Ha-Adam, which means man, the Homo sapiens, really. But then at 2:24, only when woman appears does concretely existing man appear. So the Genesis texts make it clear that the first created person, if you will, is a man. But we have to understand it that way. But the profundity of woman being made out of Adam is just astonishing if you look at it through the Hebraic anthropology. So woman is actually prefigured in man in Genesis 1, basically, because Adam contains everyone. So, for example, if you look at Michelangelo's painting on the Sistine Chapel, you'll see there, where he's reaching his, the creation of man.
One, yeah.
If you look at the cloud above God's head, or whatever that is, you'll see Eve in his mind. She's there. It's very clear. There's cherubims and seraphims or something, little angels, cherubs. And then there's woman. She's prefigured in the creation of Adam. So she comes out of the unity, prefigured in Adam. That's the start of understanding this. The second thing is, it's enormously significant that she's made out of his rib. This is not to indicate that she's somehow secondary. First of all, the whole hierarchy of creation that unfolds in the first account and the second is of a hierarchy on its way up. It starts in lower level creatures, and it ends up in higher. In the first account, man and woman.
Right at the end.
In the second account, after none of the animals seem to match, right? Woman is not created second. She's created last and on the way up. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So take that in. Yeah. Now, don't panic, though, because the Hebrew is, she's called Ezer. And Ezer, when we say helper, the Hebrew term is Ezer, and it means divine aid. So she's help sent by God, I say, to help man to live. Because it's not until a woman appears that man even knows what he's there for.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, so the man's sort of genius doesn't come until there's a woman there, and the woman's genius doesn't come.
No, not really. No, his genius, you can derive his genius from the fact that he's in the garden with God, apparently, for some period of time, naming all the animals.
Yeah.
So let's come back to that. But I just want to clarify that she's divine aid, but the full phrase that the sacred author uses is very interesting. It's Ezer Kenegdo. Kenegdo is a preposition, meaning in front of, in the spatial sense. Now, why would the sacred author have thrown in a preposition there? Those are like throwaway words. It has real meaning. Yeah. She's Ezer Kenegdo, help sent by God, standing face to face with man. So she's not above him, she's not below him. And what I say is that it's absolutely from Scripture, you have to derive this fact that without man, woman has no place. But without woman, man has no future.
Okay, yeah.
And so take your pick. They both
Neither one's a good option.
No, they both, right.
Yeah,
They're meant to be together.
Right.
And it's only when woman appears that human community appears.
Right.
And all of a sudden, his purpose, God gives him the garden to take care of. Weed the garden for all of eternity, God. Yep, that's what you're going to do every day. Yep. Okay, whatever you say. But when woman appears, he says, oh, I see my capacity to identify the goods of creation and what they are for is to be put at the service of my woman, of my family,
Yeah.
of my community. He doesn't know who he is. She reveals to him who he is in that they mirror each other.
Yeah,
right?
that's interesting. So he has work to do before.
Yes, he does.
But that work doesn't have a
purpose. A
right.
telos.
Yeah.
So so let's see. Aquinas says that the man must have been given a distinct preternatural gift for him to be able to see into the nature of things. It's really profound if you understand anything about epistemology. To be able to see into the nature of something is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Human beings, generally speaking, cannot do that, but they could in the garden because they had infused knowledge.
And it's at the naming of the animals. Like he could see into what this thing
Yes,
is.
he didn't need to go through all the work of reasoning and
You have to do what a
calculate.
scientist has to normally do. He just knew.
He knew.
Yeah.
And that's what allowed him to name them
Right.
and take dominion over them in so naming them, because that's what the Semitic language would indicate.
Yeah.
So how I understand, back to the stereotypical roles of men and women, what's the origin of that? I point out, in retrospect to Aquinas, I'm sure he's listening, because if he were here, he'd be all over this, and he's saying, "Oh yes, please correct my mistakes."
Yeah.
If Adam had a distinct preternatural gift, so did Eve.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they both had the preternatural gifts.
Right. Exactly.
So I say that his infused knowledge directed at creation equipped him to see into the nature of the created order. What this permits him to do is to sort of leverage the goods of creation, service of his family. Men are more oriented toward things. We know this, it's part of the science, right? So it seems to be true from Scripture also that he's naming the lower leveled creatures, realizing none of them match him. We have to find some other way, right? But he's not. It's so amazing because men have this incredible capacity and strong propensity for identifying what something is, what can be predicated of it, what kind of attributes it has, and a systematic way of assessing that. It's not just they like toy trucks when they're little and big trucks when they're old, or obsessed with tools like my husband. It's really that what emerges then are systems of taxonomy, of philosophy, of theology, of law.
Yeah.
Men are experts at that. Doesn't mean women can't do it. But the men, it wasn't because they were trying to oppress women. It was because that's their gift.
That's their gift. Yeah.
But woman, the infused knowledge she brought to the scene saw into Adam. And women are more inclined to attend to persons. So they're in the order of creation. They have these two complementary orientations toward the world. And so it doesn't translate into women can only do this kind of work and men can only do that kind of work. But isn't it true and amazing that the data seems to support the fact that women tend to, as a whole, self-select into the caring professions, into those sorts of activities, and men self-select into the other.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did teach a class, a neurobiology class, and there's some experiments with like newborns. where they give
Yeah.
them a pictures of
Yeah.
like mobiles that they're staring at, and the boys will actually spend more time staring
That's
at
right.
just sort of objects,
No, I know.
where the women will stare more
They'll
at the
look at
faces.
your face, yeah.
At the faces, if you give
And
them.
if
So
you- if you
it's
talk-
right there from the beginning.
Yes, no, that's right. And there's so much data. We could
Yeah,
list
yeah,
all the
yeah.
examples. It's absolutely demonstrable. It has to do with the way our brains are designed. Neuroscience centers in here. It's just an amazing thing. And look, that's what the sacred, for sure. If you look at the Hebrew, which is what I did,
Yeah.
I went back to the original Hebrew. And Hebrew is a fairly nuanced language. It's going to depend on the questions you bring to the text, what you discover.
Right, yeah.
So I think that I asked the text the right questions because I wasn't under the sway of Aristotle's unfortunate error that he declared women are malformed males.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it seems that that makes the Genesis text the reason that women would be created second is because it's pointing to the community. Like
Yes.
the woman is
Yeah.
there with the man.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
the orientation to others. Where
Yeah, and she's the future.
it wouldn't make sense if she's
Yeah.
created first. If her genius is
Right.
to see into Adam, like you say,
Right.
or
Yeah,
see
yeah.
into other people.
So men and women need each other
Yeah.
in every way. And so one last thing, and then I don't.
No, keep
is this
going, keep
okay?
going.
All
This-
right.
this is great.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh! Someone just
No, this is,
Go ahead.
You're the guest. We want to hear what you have to say. Keep
okay.
going. Yeah.
So here's another wrinkle on it that's so profound. The fact that she's made out of Adam's rib is just astonishing when you think about what that means. It means the one flesh union. Had she not been made out of Adam's rib, had a part of Adam not been taken out of him and made into woman. There's all sorts of things you want to say about that. She's made out of his rib, near his heart, not his head, not his feet, all those things. There's lots of through lines in Scripture and the tradition around that. But the real point, the beginning point is to realize that without that fact, the one flesh union that is spoken about, that for this reason a man leaves his family, clings to his wife, they become one flesh, would be merely an external event where two bodies come together in the marital act. But the fact that she's made from Adam's rib organically connects them for all of eternity. We are complementary, you and I, right now. It's not just about marriage. It's not just about sex. It's about the fact that we are linked forever in this mission to return all things to Christ.
Yeah.
I'm made in a certain way, in an ancestral way, it seems awkward to say made from you, let's not go there. But you know what I'm saying? This is just the most, and everybody gets upset. Why is the woman made from man? That must make her secondary. Why is she created second? Well, she's not created second. But the fact that I'm made from man means that man cannot dismiss her as merely a distraction
Another creature.
or an
something.
object.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Not possible. So, what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
That points to the profound reality.
Yes.
Of the necessity of both. Right?
Yeah.
And the unity. Yeah. One of the things that always comes to mind when you start talking to people about the differences between men and women, and you alluded to it earlier, is sort of these maybe the gender roles, and then it sort of constrains sort of human freedom and so forth, it gives men or women a pass to say, look, I'm a man, I don't have to be relational, that's not my genius. My genius is go to work, so that's the woman's genius. Whatever.
You do it.
You do it, right? So how would you unpack that?
Yeah, okay, so we're both called to be fully human, to actualize every potency we have, as the philosophers would say. And the way I understand this is what I refer to as a mutual begetting.
Okay.
You have potencies that you have not yet actualized, and probably you have because are you married?
Yes. Yeah.
And do you have kids? Is that
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
Okay. So for sure, there are plenty of potencies that weren't actualized before you got married that are now.
Right. Yeah,
and I would
sure.
bet that you are more relational now than you were in a certain sense, if you think back. More in tune with the other, more attending to the other, your children, your wife, even your students. So it's not that you don't have the potency to be receptive, and many men are, right? The fundamental posture of the female body is certainly receptivity, and the fundamental posture of the male body is certainly activity, the active principle. The man makes the woman pregnant. He begets the child. She's potentially a mother until a man comes along to assist her. So those are all true things. But what needs to be recognized is that just as you have potencies that your wife or the women you encounter, or even just people you encounter, call out of you, so do I. And in my case, I think you can say, at least I'm testing this on all sorts of audiences, women tend to take things personally. This is a feature of original sin for a woman. We can come back to that. And I'm just using this as an example. My husband has no patience with that. Frankly, men don't care. Yeah, they don't. This is very clear. When little boys and little girls in a preschool, when a box of toys arrives at the door, the little boys drop what they're doing and go unpack it and check it out.
Yeah.
Little girls could care less. They stay in their little circle talking, whispering. And then, but if new kids arrive, the little girls are all over that. The boys are over there playing whatever game, and they really don't care. And I'll say to my women students who are wondering why he hasn't called them, he just forgot about you. Don't worry about it. Don't take it personally. Their brains are oriented in a different way. So anyway, we probably didn't need me to say all that. But my point is that my husband men have this capacity for impartiality, not objectivity. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Women are not subjective and men are objective. It's nonsense. But they have this capacity for impartiality, for detachment, that is built into them because you are the other to the child.
Yeah.
You are the other. Yeah. You represent the active principle, really. And so that's something I have learned from my husband, how to recover from moments that I regret. Or where I feel like I didn't say the right thing, I didn't do the right thing, no one likes me, blah, blah, blah. My talk didn't go so well. He's like, shut up. Yes, it did, and it did, just stop that. So I've learned that from him. I've learned to take more risks. I learned to be brave in certain situations. I've learned so much from him. He's my hero. I just love him.
Yeah, no, I understand. I see the same with my wife in terms of the relationality that I did not have going into a marriage. That it just brought out of you in the way that you interact with your wife and the way I see her interact with my children. And you learn those things to bring those out of yourself.
So we have the full panoply of potencies, but because of our basic orientation to the world, which is necessary, and our main focus, which is necessary, does not mean that we're done. This is so incredible about human beings. We're never done becoming fully who we're meant to be.
Right. And I think that would get to like the answer to the question of these strict sort of gender roles is that no, because you have these potencies, there's going to be women in all disciplines. There's going to be men in all disciplines. They might be overrepresented or underrepresented because of their innate differences, but those potencies can come out from all.
So the real terrible thing about our situation now is when a little girl, like I did, expresses an interest in playing war with her brothers and digging in the mud, or wants to play baseball, which I did, you're automatically marched down the hall to the counselor who says, maybe you're a boy. No, there's overlapping, bell-shaped curves, right? I mean, there's extremes on either side, or, extremes isn't such a lovely word, but for the most part, girls are. For the most part, boys are. And there's absolutely good reasons for that, and it is not social conditioning. That's nonsense, because within 4 hours of birth, they are already displaying those characteristics.
Exactly.
Nothing to do. And that's true across cultures and across generations.
Yeah, and you also see it in other primates. There's
Yeah.
differences between the
Right.
Yeah. So it seems very much comes
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
the biology. It's not something that's being imparted.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that you sort of alluded to was, you mentioned original sin and so
Yeah.
forth, but it seems like given the orientation that men have, the orientation that women have, they both have a propensity to certain types of disorders,
That's
right?
correct. In psychology, it's sort of astonishing that men and women both, their disorders correspond to what I argue are the evident effects of original sin. So, and I've written about this rather extensively. I have a kind of a theory about what happens in Genesis 3. And my argument would be you cannot understand what happens in Genesis 3 if you don't get Genesis 1 and 2 correct.
Okay.
Because what were the unique gifts they both had? Man for this orientation toward the created order, and women for persons, for looking into the eyes of another
Yeah.
and calling out of them their potential. So in the garden, it's very clear they get different consequences, right?
Right.
Woman
Yeah.
is going to now desire her husband, even though she knows he wishes to dominate her. So her gift for relationship, her clarity about her own worth, her place in the order of creation is turned upside down.
Yeah.
Now women are needy. They're afraid of being abandoned, right? They're clingy. They hold on way to their children, maybe to a lover, much longer than they should. So that's women. That's their gift turned upside down. We have trouble getting along with other women, frankly. We're sort of, in our own way, toxic sometimes. Yeah. So anyway, but then listen to the story about man. The first thing that God says to him is not, you'll have to work by the sweat of your brow. The first thing that God says to Adam after the fall, after they sin, is, and I quote, because you listened to your wife. If you look at the scripture passage,
Yeah.
the first, after he gives us the consequences to woman, he turns to man and he says, because you listened to your wife, you will have to work by the sweat of your brow. Now, what's that all about, I thought? There goes my theory. Does this mean men shouldn't listen to their wives?
Yeah.
No. The subtext is because you listen to your wife and not to me. It was Adam, it was man who got the instructions about don't eat from
Right,
that tree.
yeah.
Woman heard it secondhand, and anyway, his sin in that moment, sure, it was that he ate of the fruit because he was just as curious as she was, but his real sin was that he failed to protect her.
Yeah. Right.
He should have said, no, honey, I don't think we're supposed to do that. And maybe pulled her arm back and said, no, but no, he didn't. And then he blamed it on her anyway. The woman you gave me made me
Right.
do. Yeah, so, this is very important because his task, his place in the family is lost
As the protector.
if he doesn't listen to God.
Right.
All authority comes from God. Yeah. So if he says, okay, I'm the head of this family and I'm just going to, that means I get to do whatever I
Yeah.
want. Wrong. Get the hook, because that is not correct. So yes, I think the man is the head of the family. I do. And there's, we can talk about that further. I don't have a problem with that. It seems very clear. He's the author of the family.
Right.
He's the source of life, because I'm just potency in the sense of conceiving children, unless there's a man who comes to assist me. There's nothing scary about that to me. It's the way my body's designed. I'm proud of it. I can have children and you cannot. How about that?
Yeah.
So that's pretty darn cool, right? That's a wonderful gift, an amazing gift that women have that they're shunning now, which is really diabolical in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned sort of toxic femininity, but it seems that the men in particular have sort of lost their bearing, like young
Yes.
men in particular,
Yes.
over the last
Yeah.
few decades. And
Yeah.
there's this idea of toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
and there is certain aspects of masculinity that can be sinful and toxic, just like
Yeah.
with. But what is your thought of why men are so sort of adrift, nowadays, and not knowing what are they missing?
Right. Well, let's start with the toxic masculinity claim. It's nonsense. If you read the American Psychological Association report in which this all emerged in a big way,
Yeah.
what they're equating with toxic
Okay.
is traditional masculinity. Adam protecting Eve.
Right.
With men opening the door, lifting heavy objects, seeing themselves as the provider and the defender and the protector of the family. Okay, that's what's under attack.
Yeah.
Let me just add to that if you look further, because there are psychological accounts, analysis, research being done into toxic femininity. If you have to look for it, but it's there. Guess what that is? It's not aggressive females
No, it's
marching in the streets with pink hats. That's not the problem. No,
Yeah.
let's not go there. But toxic femininity are the attributes that we typically ascribe to women: empathy, tenderness, a willingness to sacrifice oneself for the good of the other, which of course men do also, but mothers do in a particular way. All the things that we equate with the natural order of things. Men protect, women nurture. What is wrong with that? Both of those things are required for the human species to survive.
Yeah.
Be on guard, I'm saying, because what they're trying to do is destroy men and destroy
It's like they're
men and
going
women.
right after the feminine genius and the masculine genius,
Yeah.
and calling that
Yeah,
toxic.
that it's toxic.
Yeah.
What nonsense, right? So yes, I think it's true that men can be overbearing. What this is the result of original sin.
Right. Yeah.
After original sin, man looks at everything as an object. When he first saw a woman, he said, "Here is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh."
Right, yeah.
He knew she was a person. He knew he couldn't dominate her like he
Yeah.
could the other things in creation. And so after the fall, he loses sight of that. And now he treats everything as an object to dominate. So we need to understand each other through that lens. You are under this influence of original sin, and so am I. And we have to keep that in mind, that the gifts that ought to be ours are only there in potency in a certain area. Yeah. And so I can't pretend that I'm perfect and you're not. And vice versa.
Right. You can use those gifts for the wrong reason, right?
We absolutely need to listen to each other, to respect each other more, sympathize with each other more.
Yeah.
I don't actually take sexism seriously. I don't. I mean, I know there's tons of women. I've experienced it, in the work. I can tell you all sorts of stories.
I could imagine. Yeah.
But I mean, I understand now that it's a dead end to pursue that, because men can be alerted to their behavior when they're destructive. Yeah. But for the most part, they don't mean anything by it. They're just, forgive me, thoughtless. Yeah, they're just not thinking this.
Guilty there.
Yeah. Well, women have better peripheral vision. Men's brains are organized this way. They're taking that hill, right?
Yeah.
They're really good at that, and thank goodness they are. Well, women, their brains are organized this way, right?
Yeah.
More connections between
the hemispheres.
Yeah, and this gives them particular gifts. It's why I can remember where my husband left his cell phone, or Maddie left her backpack, or whatever. Yeah, it's not like I'm so superior. It's my gift to the world.
Yeah.
That's what. Why am I being so stingy? Right? Why would I be stingy with the gifts that are mine to give? So, yeah, I forget where we're headed with that. Yeah.
So maybe as we get here to the end of the show, do you talk a little bit about, and you've alluded to it throughout, this is how does properly understanding, maybe you could start with the male genius and then the feminine genius, how does that aid in human flourishing, right? So how is it for me to flourish? I really have to understand the masculine genius and use it properly. And how does this aid in women to flourish, to know what the feminine genius, rather than being restrictive, right? How does it help me become the person I'm meant to be?
Yeah. So I want to refer to the work of Cardinal Angelo Scola here in his book, Nuptial Mystery, because it's kind of a shorthand for understanding it. Cardinal Scola argues that in a family, or for any human being to flourish, boy or girl, they have to be introduced to two laws that are both necessary for human flourishing. One is the law of gratuity, and the other is the law of exchange. The law of gratuity is the law of unconditional love. Every child must feel from the beginning, from the moment they come out, that they are unconditionally loved. And that introducing the child to that is for sure the mother's place. Because isn't it true that a mother will forgive and forgive and forgive and give a kid another chance, and the father's like, I'm done with him, kick him out of the house, I've had enough. And the father's task is to introduce the child to the law of exchange. And what does that mean? That nothing is free, and that you have to put something of yourself on the line at a certain point. You have to give something back to the community that brought you into being, it's okay to take risks.
Yeah.
The mom's like, oh no, don't, if it weren't for mom's kids, some kids wouldn't live past the age of 4. If it weren't for dad, they'd never take risks, right? So I think those are just really true. I think it's true that both those laws are necessary for human flourishing. But Scola goes on to say that the child actually gets his identity from the father, because you are the other. The child can say, without your presence, he can say, well, I know how I was born. I just popped out of mommy's tummy.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you are there, you represent the other. You begot him. And he doesn't put it that way. He doesn't know that consciously, but he knows it. And so one of the great tragedies, perhaps the worst of our era, is that fathers have left the home. So your original question, and I know we have to wrap up, what happened to men? It started in 1965, and then, Paul VI wrote in defense of, the church's position on this, 1965, when we decided to remove the man from the reproductive decisions that a woman makes. A man doesn't know if the woman is contracepting or not.
Right.
He doesn't know if after they had their one-night stand, if she got pregnant or not. He's not sure if the child she claims is his is really his, right? So basically, 1965, we said to men, we'll take care of this part of life. You go on and do your thing. And it's been a steady descent ever then. Why wouldn't men remove themselves from family life, or remove themselves? If I'm not what you want, women, fine. I'm going to go be with my bros. At least they know how, at least they like football or something. I don't know. We don't want to reduce men to that. But you know what I mean? Women lost their place, so men lost theirs. That's what happened.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that it snowballs, because the children need both of those to see the masculine and the feminine genius.
That's right.
And as you said, to bring that out of them, to be, as you say, they need both of those to flourish.
And in the process of all of this, we've completely lost track of the great joy that children are.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if you can just maybe, in the last word, just sort of sum up, if some student comes in, can you just sum up sort of what the church's positive vision is for men and women, and what is it that the church's message is, or that will transcend sort of what they're hearing from the culture?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, let me just articulate the way the church even puts the question.
Yeah.
She says, why did God make us male and female? And what are the implications of that decision?
Yeah.
That's the pursuit. And as a punchline, we can quote John Paul II, who said that it's complementarity, the complementarity of men and women, that gives them their mission, which is to create not only human families, but human history itself. And I think it's easy to see this in the family, but the big question is, how are we working together in the world? Because I would say that we're not doing a real good job of creating human history. So the church is very clear, been pleading with women since 1945 to step up to the plate. The closing address to women from the Second Vatican Council was a plea to women, they say, imbued with the spirit of the gospel to aid humanity in not falling. And they said in 1968, or 65, sorry.
Okay.
Please, women, reconcile people with life. Yeah. Well, that quote's from Evangelium Vitae 99, but that doesn't matter. There's a through line from Pius XII, the end of World War II, to even Pope Francis has called for a theology of women, which I don't support. They don't need any more attention than they've already gotten. But, men have I think, in a sort of metaphysical or cosmic sense anyway, I think they understand now that women are needed.
Yeah.
And we need their voices. And unfortunately for women like me, the space has been usurped by the women marching down the street.
Right.
Uttering terrible things. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the church is calling out the genius of women in every aspect of life,
Yes.
every aspect of society.
That's right.
And that can help the genius of men flourish. So you see this complementarity for men to be who they are. You need women to be who they are, and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true, and I think that, like I said, where we started, I don't think you can understand woman apart from man. And I think in the same breath that you're saying we need the genius of women, you need a full-throated recognition of the contributions that men have made and are still making to the sustaining our civilizations. Men deserve our gratitude, not our ridicule.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a wonderful conversation, Dr. Savage. So glad that
I did most of the talking.
No, that's the
my
point.
favorite kind.
We want to hear what you had to say. So that was wonderful. So
thank you.
Thanks for being with us. And thank you for listening. We have other episodes of Purposeful Lab on Franciscan University's faithandreason.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you on a future episode.